Hello everyone and welcome to episode 23 of the Layton Fitness podcast. Now in today's episode we're going to be discussing whether you can actually build muscle and lose fat simultaneously to any significant degree. Now for most individuals I really do suggest focusing on a block of time on either muscle gain or fat loss and then transitioning to the opposite goal for another block of time. So the main reason being, by trying to focus on both goals at the same time, you're going to essentially achieve suboptimal results for both goals. The main reason for this, for muscle gain to happen to any significant degree, you need to be in an extended caloric energy surplus over an extended period of time. So consuming more calories than you're burning, and vice versa for the fat loss phase. For an extended period of time, you need to be in that net energy deficit, so consuming less calories than you're consuming. Now, with that being said, there are a few examples where muscle gain and fat loss can happen simultaneously to a significant degree, and those are these individuals. An absolute rank beginner, so someone who's new to weight training, is going to see that recomposition for a short period of time where they can build muscle and lose fat simultaneously. Another good example is a overweight individual who starts doing weight training. By default, they're going to see, with the caveat their nutrition allows for this, they're going to see that body fat being reduced and an increase in muscle mass. Another example is an individual returning from a layoff, so someone who has a period of weeks and months without training, and then they come back to weight training again. They're going to see some recomposition. This has happened to myself a couple of times during my training career. A couple of broken legs when I used to play football. I'd have anywhere between 3 to 6 months off weight training. Then when I returned back, I'd definitely regain the gains I'd lost quicker, and also I'd see that recomposition of fat loss and muscle gain. However, this is only for a short period of time. The final individual is obviously a drug user. Someone taking anabolic steroids and certain compounds will be able to attain this goal of more muscle, less body fat. However, I'm discussing natural trainees. Within all my podcasts and content, I'm always referring to the natural, drug-free trainees. It's important to give that caveat. So what I'm also going to do within this podcast is give you some good ballpark body fat percentage targets to help you decide whether it's best to go into a muscle gaining phase or a fat loss phase. And the reason why I think this is so useful is because most people are very emotional about what goal they think they should be trying to attain, but having some objective ballpark body fat percentage figures, it can help take the emotion out of the decision and actually help you decide what's best for you. Now, I'm basically using these figures based on a brilliant article from Layton Fitness. I'm going to give you the body fat percentages below. It's really interesting. A couple of years ago when I went to the Alan Aragon UK conference, and this question was actually brought up, and Alan actually disagreed. If I'm honest, I take more of Lyle's side. I do think these body fat percentage figures certainly give a good framework for most individuals. However, if you are, say, an advanced trainee, there's no reason why, essentially, if you were over this body fat percentage target, that you couldn't continue in a gaining phase, because you have a very good understanding of how to lose body fat as well. You're an advanced trainee. However, for an intermediate and beginner, I think it's good having these ballpark percentage figures which help you take the emotion out of the decision making. So without further ado, Layton McDonald's figures are below. So he suggests that if you're a male, you should be as lean as 10 to 12% body fat or lower before entering a muscle gaining phase. I actually disagree to a point with Layton. I personally prefer if you were in around the 15-16% mark. If you're around here or slightly lower, I think it's absolutely fine if you're going into a muscle gaining phase. And that'll be around 24 to 27% for females. However, if you're any higher than this, any higher than 15-16% for males and any higher than 24 to 27% for females, I'd suggest focusing on a fat loss phase first to bring you back to the starting body fat percentage figures, and then you can transition into a muscle gain phase. So this should give you some very good ballpark figures on what you should be looking to do to help take the emotion out of the decision. And it's quite a common theme when people email me asking about my online coaching. This is a common theme there. They want to achieve both goals at the same time. Often the body fat percentages they say they are, they're actually not. They're usually a lot higher, and usually the common case is their ultimate goal is muscle gain, but because they've got too much body fat, we usually start with a fat loss phase first, and then we'll transition into the muscle building phase. And this is for very good reasons. When you're a leaner individual, you've got lots of nutrient partitioning advantages in the sense that when you're leaner, your body will utilise that food much better. So once you've got the basis of whether you need to be in a fat loss phase or a muscle gain phase, it's important to discuss a few other important points. So one is, if you're going into a muscle gaining phase, there will be some fat gain. Just because you're going to be in an extended caloric surplus over a period of time, there will be some fat gain during this process. It's important to consciously be aware of this, to appreciate it, but at the same time try and minimise this negative effect as much as possible. So the reason I said it is almost two schools of thought here. You get some individuals that get overly fat during their muscle gaining phase, and they fail to realise they're going to at some point have to lose this body fat by essentially dieting for longer, which is obviously a big negative. On the flip side, you have individuals that try to stay too lean during the muscle gaining phase and ultimately don't make any significant strength gains or muscle gains. And that tends to be what I see more often. To be fair, that's something I've personally suffered with for a long time, almost trying to be too cautious, trying to stay too lean, and ultimately it takes you much longer to see the same progress. But at the same time, you don't want to get overly fat because you're going to have to lose that body fat at some point as well. So next I want to talk about the individual differences between transitioning from a cut to a bulk and then a bulk to a cut. So if you're transitioning from a cut to a bulk, it's a very sensitive and delicate phase once you finish your dieting, and then when you transition to the what's called a reverse diet and muscle gaining phase. Reverse diet is actually the opposite to a traditional diet. Traditional diet, you're mainly focusing on reducing calories over time, whereas a reverse diet is you're slowly reintroducing calories. So once you've finished the end of the diet, I personally recommend having 2 weeks following the same macronutrients and calorie targets you followed at the end of the diet. Now just allow your metabolic rate to stabilise, and then you're going to focus on slowly reintegrating calories over a period of weeks and months, and you're going to be focusing on these weight gain targets on the list below. The reason why this is so important is at the end of the diet you're in a very delicate phase where it's very easy to put on body fat very quickly. So I'd suggest being cautious. Certainly within the first 4 to 6 months of the reverse diet muscle gain phase, you already want to be adding a small amount of calories back in, and then you can start adding this in a more linear fashion. But those first 4 to 6 weeks, be very cautious and careful. Transitioning from a bulk to a cut is very simple indeed. And the great thing about doing this is at the end of the bulking phase, you'll essentially be a point where you'll be consuming a large amount of calories, and therefore this gives you more calories to play with during the energy deficit. So for example, this is going to help with maintaining strength in the gym, therefore this will help with maintaining muscle mass in the gym. You've got more calories to play with, therefore when you hit a plateau, you've got more room to make adjustments. And essentially you've got more options, whereas if you start a fat loss phase on a list with calories, you're almost backed into a corner because you've got minimal calories to play with. And this really does help having high calories on so many different levels. So that's a very simple approach going from a bulk to a cut. You're just slowly tapering calories and or increasing cardio subject to your progress. So you want to be consuming as many calories as possible while losing body fat. Once you reach a plateau, you're going to make a small change to calories and or increasing cardio, and then you're just making small manipulations subject to progress, and the cycle continues in that fashion. So let's discuss realistic weight gain targets for beginner, intermediate and advanced trainees with regards to muscle gain. So beginner, you're going to be looking around 2 to 3 pounds a month, still not a huge amount. Have you added this over a year, this would be quite a significant difference. Intermediate, about 1 to 2 pounds a month, and advanced, half a pound to a pound, and you're mainly focusing on gym performance as an advanced training. So obviously you'll see these figures are respective to how advanced the training is. Obviously intermediate to advanced have already put on a reasonable amount of muscle mass. They're closer to their genetic potential. So by trying to attain the same weight gain targets as a beginner, they're just going to get overly fat. So when you get to the advanced stage, like I said, you're mainly focusing on gym performance, improving strength and volume over time. You're going to be in a small surplus. That's going to be your main focus, the gym performance. Intermediate, 1 to 2 pounds a month. You've still got room to make improvements, and the beginner, 2 to 3 pounds. So hopefully you found this useful. Hopefully you can start applying this immediately. And if you can take just one piece of knowledge away, it is that one principle of focusing on one goal at a time. Really decide whether you need to be in a fat loss phase or a muscle gain phase. Block out the time required to reduce the body fat or gain the muscle, and then transition to the other goal. Because it's all too common, I see people trying to fluctuate between the two goals on a weekly or fortnightly or monthly basis, and you end up getting nowhere. You end up making no significant improvements in either department. So therefore, that's my biggest takeaway for you today. Okay, thank you very much for listening. I'll look forward to speaking to you next week. If you're still yet to download my free book, How to Set Up a Nutrition Plan, go to James Layton, Layton Fitness.co.uk, tab at the top of the page for free ebook, and you can download that immediately.